Pandemic, panic, public schools, and riots. Let's talk about it on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
And we are so glad that you're here. You always have a place at our table. Well, a bed in our home, a chair at dinner or whatever. But whatever, we're glad you're here. And I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Our favorite megachurch pastor, Zach Van Dyke, is here. Zach says he has a dad bod, as it's also known, a father figure.
That's right. I worked very hard for this bod. So
I was saying earlier when we were talking before we went on the air that I expected everybody to say something and not leave me swinging in the wind. And Zach, that's because he's ordained and a pastor and very spiritual and a contemplative, said, you know what would be cool? If we would just be quiet and let everybody enjoy the gift of silence.
Yes.
Probably not going to happen, but it says some good things about you, Zach. Matthew Porter is with us. Matthew, thanks for not getting us kicked off more stations than we did while I was on vacation.
Do what I can.
You done good. And our producer, Jinx, is working hard in his little glass booth. Jinx is a sound guy, so of course his hair... I
doing the hair again?
You wrote this, Matthew.
We're doing the hair again?
His hair has lots of volume.
Listen, I found that joke in the discount bin at the joke store for 99 cents.
Did you wear a mask?
To get it. Yes, I wore my mask.
Our video director, John Myers, who saved my posterior this morning, I might say. Not going to give you the details, but he does that often. He's in his tech bunker, and if you haven't seen the beautiful new keylife.org, make sure you check it out. John oversaw that project and 1,000 others.
Good job.
Hey.
And Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life, while a medical doctor gives a checkup. Dr. Bingham just asks for a check, please. And Kathy Wyatt is the soft feminine side of the program. Kathy believes a balanced diet means having a cookie in each hand, and all of us are glad that she does.
Steve, that was an attractive shot of your elbow.
Right.
Well,
right.
I was trying to get some notes from a website.
And that's an attractive shot of your notes, too.
Kathy, he's
Can we get a tally light on this camera?
Yeah, right.
Listen, we are without a guest for this broadcast.
Which, how is that even possible?
I think we said something that offended most of our guests. And
nobody has anything going on. Like, what are people doing? Like, how everyone is
they're just sitting around it. Right. I agree.
Let's just randomly start calling friends.
Yeah, let's just call someone.
That's what we should do. We should all get on the phone and call and see if we can find anybody that has an hour
would
free.
You please come on our program?
Right.
Actually, in fact, this one was planned. A lot of stuff going on, and we thought we would sit around and just discuss it. And we're not anybody. We're not important. We're not talking heads. We're not politicians. Our lives don't make an impact. We're not trying to change the world. We're just normal people who sit around and have some technology and decided that we were going to talk about some things. And there are a number of subjects, obviously, given where we are right now, that we could spend the whole program talking about. But I was reading this morning about public schools and the great controversy about whether public schools should open up or should they remain closed. Just so you know, there are 120,000 public schools in America. That adds up to 55 million students. So that'll give you an idea of how big the issue is. It really is. And all of those schools have been closed down. It's been really interesting. In a survey conducted by IPOS Public Affairs, showed that private and charter schools were substantially more likely to connect with students than public school teachers. Now, that's anecdotal, but it may say something about public schools that needs to be said. There are those, and I'm not one of them, I'm cynical, but I'm not that cynical, that think that the best thing that ever happened in America was closing down the public schools. And World Magazine made reference to what had been said about public schools and how hard it was to do online learning. And they took issue with the fact that nobody mentioned Christian homeschoolers. And there are hundreds of thousands of those across the country. But the interesting thing with most Christian homeschoolers is that they found it necessary to form subgroups where their kids can be, quote, socialized because human beings were created to be with human beings. And we live in a time where in many places we're forced not to be with other human beings. I read this morning that in Kentucky, a lady went and tested for COVID because her parents, who were elderly, wanted her to visit, and she wanted to make sure that she was safe. And the powers gave her a form to sign. And it said that I will tell you if I decide to leave my house and visit my parents. And she said, yeah, I ain't going to sign that. This is America. It'll be cold in a hot place before I sign that. And you know what happened? They locked her down with manacles in her house, and she can't go anywhere. There's something wrong, guys. There really is. But going back to the original discussion that I'm bringing up, I rudely interrupted myself because if I get started, I can't stop. But it's about public schools. Schools are really important, and people have always known that. It was said that during the communist revolution that if they could get the child before he or she were 6, those children would be theirs forever. That's kind of scary, but it has some truth to it. The most important thing going on in America right now in terms of transferring our culture and who we are and how we define ourselves, the freedoms we enjoy, the most important instrument of transmitting that is in the public schools because of the millions and millions of students who are being touched every day by teachers. And so the schools really are important. It's interesting that charter schools and Christian schools and private schools, by and large, have decided to go back to the classroom. While in public schools, there is so much controversy about that. And the public school unions, at least in California, have said, no way we're going back because we might get COVID. And so public education goes down the tube. It gets involved in politics. It gets involved with people and ego and self-righteousness. And all of a sudden, the kids are forgotten. And I don't know about you, but that makes me angry. And just like my phone ringing makes me angry. I don't know if you guys can hear it. I thought I turned it off, but I'm an old guy doing the best he can. And so we're going to take a break and we're going to come back and maybe discuss some of the things that I brought up. What's happening in our country? Are we going to lose what so many have worked so hard to get? We have great flaws in this country. And this is an opportunity to make a difference and to fix some of those. But sometimes the cure can kill the patient. And so we have to be very careful when we discuss these kinds of things. And so when we get back, we're going to talk about public schools. I'm quite fond of public schools. I graduated third from the bottom in a large public high school. And it was a struggle to get to that point. But once I got to college and graduate school, it was my money, and that's a different matter altogether. When you're spending your money for your education, you try just a bit harder. And I did well. Hey, don't go away. We're gonna come back on Steve Brown, etc. Welcome back. I think my microphone was on. I was not admonishing Matthew or putting him down, just making sure that after my sermon or whatever it was, actually it was a rant. I usually don't rant in the pulpit, but occasionally I do. But this is a place for ranting and not for sermons. And I'm sure, Matthew, that you have some ideas about some of the things that I brought up.
It's a crazy time where we live. Just last week, the county came out with the options for the coming school year, which is to say, like in 3 weeks or so.
Are your kids at public schools?
They're at public schools. Okay. And it was like going to McDonald's. You could have this option or this option or there's literally 4 different options, which is great, right? You know, we like freedom of choice and everything, but it's this overwhelming of like, holy smokes. We've talked it through. We figured out what we're going to do. We're going to do kind of a remote thing, or at least initially for the first 9 weeks where they're at home. But the mind reels as far as how does this work for everybody? It'll work okay for us, but I can't help but think about other folks who, both parents are working, or there's just one parent or one guardian, and you're like, my gosh, how's this gonna work?
It's hard. And
Matthew,
a lot of single parents have to work and they can't go to work because they can't leave their kids.
No.
And I have a friend who was a professor, and I said to her, look, you and I get our paychecks no matter what, but there are a lot of people across this country whose lives are in serious trouble because of this very thing we're talking about. And by the way, I meant to say this, but the science pretty much says that kids are fairly safe. And if they get it, it's very mild. Our granddaughter got COVID-19 2 weeks ago. And she's a freshman in college. She was working at a summer camp, and it swept through the summer camp. But all of the kids that got it at the summer camp, it was like a cold, and not even a bad cold. They quarantined our granddaughter, and she hated that. They wouldn't let her out of her room. I was telling the guys here that they cooked a lot of flounder and pancakes because that was all they could slide under their door, under her door. But she's okay. And the only other person I know that got COVID is a police officer in the town where I live, who's a friend of mine. And he and 20 others on the police force got it. Again, it was like a cold, not even a bad cold. He said, I didn't feel bad. They've all been quarantined and they're all back. So I think a part of this discussion is this feels like the bubonic plague and that we're all going to die. You know, one day I think it's a crock, and the next day I really think this isn't the way I wanted to die. As I put my mask on and I'm careful about not going close. But, you know, you don't know. Television stations and media are looking for ratings. Politicians are looking for votes, and everybody's looking for money. And there's a buck to be made in this thing. And so when they feed us this information, you know, you want to jump off the nearest bridge. And I'm cynical enough to think that this is bad. It's serious. In the beginning, nobody knew. And so all the things that were done were absolutely necessary. Close down the schools, get ventilators, prepare the hospitals, you know, do it all. And then all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and it's bad, but it's not as bad as they said it was going to be. And that kind of bothers me too. Zach, back to the original subject, especially in terms of schools.
Zach, what are you guys going to do? You got a bunch of kids too, public school.
How many at last count, Zach?
We have 6 and we're done, I think. I mean, we're big public school people, and I think we want to send them back, mostly because we are not a homeschool family. Like when we had to go to home, you know, to the distance learning in the spring, it did not go well. Our kids did not do well. We did not do well with it. But I get, you know, we also, my wife doesn't have to work right now, and I could be kind of flexible, and it was still really hard for us. I can't imagine the single parent who's in this situation, or, you know, our internet is not great. And so it was really hard. And we had 3 kids all trying to do school at the same time, online. You know, in our county, 2,000 students just went missing after we went to distance learning. After the school shut down, they did not hear again from 2,000 students. And so to me, I feel like there's going to be a huge issue, kind of like what you were saying, Steve. Like the school is actually the place where some of these kids get cared for and loved in ways that they don't at home. It's what inspires them. And I'm really worried that kids that are in hard situations, that this is only making it worse for them. We at Summit do a lot with the foster care system in our area, and just kind of seeing the reality of that. And I feel like once we do start getting back in person, I feel like the foster care system is going to be overwhelmed because it's just been months and months without anyone checking on some of these kids. So I think there's no good answer to this problem either way, but to me, I'm spending a lot of time praying for those kids in really hard situations. So,
boy, I appreciate what you said. And education is more, and we're discovering it's more than just getting a collection of facts, communicating them over a computer screen so you get the facts right. Education has to do with connection and relationships and being present. And in ancillary kinds of subjects, Some of those kids don't get a decent meal except when they go to school. And so that's important too. And the thing that bothers me is that sometimes it becomes a political issue and not a kid issue. Mm-hmm. And that's true of so many things. Mm-hmm. Everything is politicized. Everything is material, is made into a weapon, weaponized, and brought into the battle so we can get somebody else, so we can win, so we can get power. And it's time for some normal people like us to just say, stop it. Think about the kids. Think about what's going on in this country. Think about the fear. Think about the way things are being shattered. Think about culture. Think about the last hundreds of years. Don't throw it away. Well, we'll continue with the conversation shortly. You're listening to Steve Brown, etc., and we're glad you're sitting around with us. That's what we're doing. We're doing what maybe you don't get an opportunity to do because of the lockdown and because nobody's supposed to go anywhere. But we have these cameras and these microphones, and so, which are really neat, by the way. You don't generally see John Myers, who's our video technical IT guy at Key Life. But he has provided these microphones, and they're really neat. There's a mixer in the microphone, a mute button, a whole bunch of stuff, and we're using our computers, and we're sitting around, and we're talking about this thing.
Acting like we know what we're doing.
Yeah, well, yes. You mash a button. John knows if it gets more complicated than that, I won't be able to do it.
Steve, you're just glad that you can hear.
That's true.
It's got a really loud headphone output.
I've been healed with earphones. Kathy, you were a teacher for a lot of years. Talk to us a little bit about education.
I hated it.
You did it for the money, right?
No, because it was a Christian school.
Oh yeah. You
stopped
making any money.
No, no, seriously. I mean, I really did think I was called to do that, but it didn't take very long for me to realize that I had missed the directions along the way. So I was glad to get out from under it. But I have so many friends at this point in my life who are grandparents, even, as well as, the people that are here participating in the program that are younger than I am, who are parents. And I don't know. I don't know how people do it. I look at Zach and Matthew, and I think, okay, they at this particular point in time are fortunate because the moms are able to, do a significant amount, if not all or whatever. But then you have situations where you have, both parents at work, or like what we've talked about before. And, what do you do? I don't know. And it's so vitally important. You cannot remove children from socialization. It's not a good thing, not a good thing at all. Oh. And what do you do if you can't send them to daycare? The daycare around the corner from where I live is open, but minimal numbers. And how do you keep 2-year-olds socially distanced?
Well,
how do you do that? Zach, how do you socially distance a 2-year-old?
You don't.
Well, this is why we're really considering, are we really married to this idea of the kids going to school? Our youngest is going into kindergarten. I'm like, you know what? I hear good things about mining. They've got tiny little hands.
Oh, no, they can Matthew, no.
They could go into surveying, landscaping. This might be the time to shift gears.
Yeah.
Become a hunter-gatherer. All options are on the table.
This could change everything.
Yeah. I mean, factories. Can we bring factories back? Let's
make this work. Back.
Yeah. Child labor. Let's why is so stringent on those laws?
Jinx, what are you guys going to do?
We sold our kids.
No, I know you can't do that because Destry's going to be a senior.
They would return. Whoever bought them would return them. So it would very quickly, like from the checkout counter to the service desk. But no, they're in high school now. Taylor will be starting into the high school, and Destry's in his senior year. So Destry does a lot of Florida virtual school anyway. So he is pretty much only taking classes at school that have labs, like the hands-on type stuff. He just focuses better on the boring classes, the histories and the maths, when he can get a checklist on the left and a how-to on the right and go to town. So, when we got the little options, I chuckled. I'm like, so you can go to school or you can do virtual school. That's what we had last year for options. I didn't think that this was a great, wonderful revelation of our new school options. I think a lot of people are getting paid to have meetings that they don't need to have. But I'm a herd mentalist, I guess would be the word. I think we've got to. This isn't going to get any better until it makes its course. It's just going to run through into its thing. I'm sure that there's a lot of truth in maybe isolating people that would be obviously susceptible, but the people that aren't, I think they need to get it. It just needs to push through. I'm not saying we go have chickenpox parties, but Zach's looking at me like, "What's that?"
No. I remember that.
You're not old enough to remember.
No. I think it's right under me that they stopped, that they had a vaccine. But yeah, I remember my buddy had it and I had to go over to his house and rub my body against his or something weird like that to try to get it.
They say that was a bad idea nowadays.
Probably was.
It was a great idea in those days.
Yeah.
That's how these things work.
You need
to prescribe morphine. Now we know. All right.
I think you need to be exposed enough to it. Like if I'm in a restaurant with someone and they're a few tables away, but some particles are floating around, and it's one thing to get that, but to put two people in the same room and force them to breathe on each other, I don't think that would be a good idea. But I'm also not huge on this vaccine idea. So ask me about that on the next show.
What idea?
The vaccine.
Oh, they say there's going to be a vaccine in the fall, but we can talk about that.
I'm not taking it.
They said that there was no way it would happen until next year, and all of a sudden, it's happening, and they may make it available in the fall. If it does nothing else, even if it kills people off, it'll shut up the talking heads. We're coming back. We're so glad you're here. As I said in the opening remarks, we're just people sitting around who have a little bit of technology so we can do this. A lot of you can't because you don't have this stuff. But we're not that smart. We're not world changers. We're not trying to make an impact. But we are people who are concerned. Things are not good right now. They're really, really scary. And the media doesn't help. Every time, if it bleeds, it leads. And boy, COVID bleeds big. And politics and riots, those bleed big. And every time they're reported, the ratings go up. You can charge more for the commercials, and everybody's happy, except the normal person like us, who are sitting there saying, good Lord, we're all going to die. We have a friend, a mutual friend who, and this is a good example of that. He's on our board, but he was working for a television station during a hurricane. and the hurricane turned left and went up the coast, or turned right and wasn't even coming into our city of Miami. And his bosses insisted that they not tell people that because their ratings were so good. And he said, I'm not doing that. That's not ethical. And I'm not going to lie to people about their danger when there's no danger. And they treated him with kindness. They fired him. And he's done quite well. Hey, George, you've been sitting there. You talk too much. You know that.
Yeah.
But you listen a lot. And when you do say things, it's important. So,
well, and I don't know about that, but the thing that was coming to mind, and we kind of referenced it a little bit earlier, is, the benefits that different people have from creating the division, creating the, controversy and so forth. And even with, it tends to make you suspicious of everything that's being reported. And you get reports that some of the, testing labs, hospitals, whatever, have some way they get paid more if they have a COVID patient than if the patient has something else or whatever. So they have a bias toward reporting patients as COVID, especially as the cause of death. If they die in a motorcycle accident, but they happen to have COVID, then they can, report it as COVID and get
literally happened this last week.
10 grand.
Exactly.
10 grand right there.
Exactly. And even you've got the controversy of the schools, and the teachers' unions are wanting to keep the schools closed. A lot of the parents need the schools to open, and, the teachers, especially public school teachers, are more likely to continue to get paid, even if the kids are not there. So there's kind of a bias from that standpoint. And then certainly being in a political year, everything becomes political controversy. Zach was making the comment off air, and maybe you want to follow up on, Zach, that, you've got a pretty evenly divided congregation in terms of Democrats and Republicans, and what people believe or hear or are inclined to support can be so affected by their political position that it becomes, confusing in terms of, well, what does this news mean?
Right. Well, yeah, I was feeling, after I said that we were planning on sending our kids back to school, I was like, oh, shoot. Like, if someone listens to this and then that they associate that with some political viewpoint, it makes, I feel like making this decision as a parent is a very tough decision. What you're going to do. And there's all kinds of factors that go into the decision, right? But in this political climate and at this particular time when we're getting close to an election, all of a sudden, all those other factors don't matter. People just immediately put you in a group of you're this kind of political person or this kind. And it makes engaging in this conversation very difficult, I think, with any kind of charity and sanity.
Yeah.
I came to your church online, and by the way, it was wonderful. The worship was wonderful, and your sermon blew me out of the water.
I got some.
You hit it out of it. It was so good. But the interesting thing in the sermon, and I think you said it more than once, this is not political. Mm-hmm. This is something we got to talk about. Mm-hmm. I assume that you get a lot of criticism, and that's true of all of us. You have a big platform because you are the pastor of a large church. The rest of us get the same thing in a smaller scale with our friends. You can't say anything at a party if you go to parties, or at a dinner if you go to dinner with friends, that doesn't have political overtones, and then what do you do with that? You just say it's not political? Is that about all you can do?
Yeah.
And then I was just going to say, and then there are the people that are really convinced if they hear, oh, it's not political, that it's really political.
That's what a partisan person would say.
Well, I guess the other thing I was thinking as you were just saying that is, it's okay for things to be political too, though, right? And I think that's another place where, Steve, you say you're to the right of Genghis Khan, right? Like you can have that political view and talk from that place, but it seems like we just can't even dialogue anymore. And that's what gets really frustrating to me.
But, it's funny because, everything is so tightly wound and just absolutely tense in a backdoory kind of way. It's like you could say to all your friends online and in person, it's like, that thing that you feel like we're missing here, that's called grace. Mm-hmm. You might not have a name for it, but that feeling of like, my gosh, I wish we could just have an allowance for differences and I could still love you and we get along. We should talk. I know about that thing.
Right.
There's some slack.
Right.
That's so true. At the heart of this are people who, like us, hopefully, are aware that we are very needy, that we're in need of grace, that we do things wrong and say things wrong. And if somehow we could be the drop of healing fluid, maybe we could open it up. It's amazing when you start a conversation by saying, I am so screwed up and so wrong so often and so sinful and have blown it so much that I'm afraid to say anything. But I'm also a preacher, so I'm going to say something, but you feel free to respond. That kind of manifestation. The problem in America, and our leaders are the most self-righteous people on the face of the earth, except me when I'm self-righteous about them. We're glad you're a part of our sitting around just talking with whatever comes to mind about some of the issues we all face. Matthew Porter, who writes a lot of the material and guides a lot of this show, did something that probably I should have done because I'm ordained and this thing is about grace and I teach grace. He did it in a very kind way and didn't say, dummy, are you not going to even mention grace? But he brought it up, and that's really what it's all about. As a matter of fact, we can't solve these problems until we realize that we can't solve these problems because we're not good enough or smart enough or wise enough. And that's where Jesus comes in, who forgives and supports and accepts. And so if we can somehow communicate that and live that out, we can speak truth and we can hear truth and we can grow. That's why, and I don't want to get too pious on this thing, that's why every day I pray for another awakening. And millions of others are praying for the same thing, because until we get what Matt brought up, there's no hope. We can't fix this thing. John Myers, who refuses to talk when we're sitting around the table, said when we were off the air about two people. One was an African-American man, one other was an African-American police officer. And somebody came along and said, you can't do this, and pushed them apart. Well, you can't do this if you think you're right all the time. But you can do it if you know that you're wrong a lot and sinful beyond belief. then maybe we can sit down and talk. So Jesus, smack them upside the head, drum to yourself, and give us one more awakening. We're due, and you seem really, really slow. Kathy, do you have a guest for next week, or are we going to do this again?
No, I do. Next week, our guest is Sam Collier. Here's his book. Interesting story. Great story. I think people will really, really enjoy. He and his twin sister were given up by their birth mother for adoption, and he was adopted by a wonderful family, but always felt like there was something missing. And it's a great story. Finally met his sister and his twin sister and other siblings, and has a great ministry now. So I think it'll be a fun conversation.
Oh, it will be. Have you ever been around people who've decided to find their birth mother or birth father, and they find them? And what happens? There are a million stories. And some of them are so deep and so moving that it even causes this cynical old preacher to shed a tear on occasion. All right, we're out of here. Zach, try not to be so political, would you? And we'll all keep talking because we just can't help it. And we're going to do it next week, same time, same place. Hope you join us. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And that gives you a wide, wide berth.